Their Fated Travels, Chapter 5, Trial of the Gods. Tordrad, Maestro and Rysandria sat together at the Altdorf Docks passenger ticket office waiting area. This was the fastest, safest way to travel, Maestro reckoned. He hoped he wouldn't be proven wrong. A staff gate opened on the far side of the area as two men came through, carrying a heavy-looking piece of luggage. Rysandria double-took at the man walking backwards with it. It was the drunken Marienberg man she had seen going into the Two-Headed Goose last night. So, she thought, he's on my barge too. Maestro had Tordrad in between he and the Shallian initiate, but still he would sometimes look across at her nervously. Tordrad was sporting a new set of armour, high-quality plate that he had obtained from his recent earnings after averting the demonic outbreak. It was a shiny buffed silver colour from head to toe. The armour had already been for sale, but his request for bare engravings at the breastplate, elbow, joints and knees had been easy to achieve for the master armoursmith he had chosen in the capital city here. The helm was reminiscent of a bear's head in some respects, with the visor having a bear's jaw style of design engraved and painted into it. The upper part of the helm was taller than normal helms, like the upper head of a bear, giving him an appearance of grandeur and ferociousness. It wasn't long now, Maestro thought, until I say goodbye to the city, perhaps forevermore. They waited. Emperor Karl Franz sat in his office, considering the paperwork in front of him. The college master halfling was due at any moment, and this appointment couldn't wait. A prompt knock on the door from one of the Emperor's staff confirmed the halfling's punctuality. The Emperor requested, "Come in!" The door was held open by a palace attendant as Tobias entered, bowing low as he did so. As soon as he was inside the room, the door was closed again. Karl Franz was in no mood to mess around. "Sit down, please," he asked. With a bow, the halfling took a seat opposite, across from the great desk, a place where legendary, world-changing meetings had been conducted. So wide was this desk that it could seat 8 people at it. Tobias looked minuscule against the massive antique. There was a silence for a few seconds, punctuated only by the precise ticking of a nearby wall clock before the Emperor began. "Herr Wilward, you have been assigned the case of Maestro Raphael Elefesion. I read your reports of last night's and today's happenings. Most interesting. But this will be the last night he spends in my city, I trust." Tobias answered respectfully.
"He assures me of such, Excellency. Even now he waits at the river barge terminus, with ticket in hand. He and the Kislevite, and the initiate girl."
"Ah, yes, the Shallian. Yes, I read her report too," added the Emperor. "She is not quite the usual type that we would see in our temple here."
"If I may be so bold," began Tobias, "she is a member of a subsect of Shallian faith. They have additional scriptures that even the main branch consider somewhat overzealous."
Karl Franz considered these words, as if every little piece of information about Maestro's case was important somehow, and said, "On the subject of the wizard, if he is not gone by morning, he shall find himself in a jail cell at my pleasure." His words seemed cold, even to Tobias, who wasn't particularly fond of Maestro. He didn't understand why. This must have shown on his face when the Emperor certified. "The man is dangerous, more than he might ever know." Tobias thought back to the initial reports on Maestro that he had been privy to. They had dated back to when Maestro was just a boy of 12 years old. 17 years ago. Young Maestro was an ambitious boy, the son of a financial advisor in the palace of Karl Franz himself. He was a noble of steady wealth. He had a comfortable life. His family's money allowed him the opportunity to seek the life that he wanted, to work in the field of specialization that he desired. What the boy desired most was to be an engineer. He could always be found tinkering with things, taking them apart to understand how they worked, and putting them back together again. He used to create his own gadgets, too. Small wind-up contraptions that spun or moved along the ground in some way, bizarre devices that could fly for a short while if thrown, or others like this. One day, however, the life he thought he would be living changed forever without warning. His performing arts troupe had been set up inside the palace throne room, putting on a play for the emperor himself and his gathered guests. Naturally, being a noble-born boy, he had been tutored in the thespian arts too, from a young age. During a particularly emotional song and dance number, the boy gestured sorrowfully with his hand, outwards towards the emperor himself, as if to further hit the dramatic point home, and just to show off. As he had done this, a ball of lightning energy shot from his fingertips and flew towards the throne. It had found its mark, knocking the emperor's famed helm clean from his head, sending it clattering noisily to the floor. The audience and actors had gone completely quiet, so quickly so that the final rolling of the helmet across the shiny stone floor could be heard by everyone present. Maestro stared in horror, first at his hand, then back to the emperor, whose head was now exposed. The guards were moving in with weapons drawn, believing it to be an attempt on the emperor's life. Before they could reach the boy, however, a wizard grabbed him by the arm that had fired the spell, holding it downwards to the ground. He spoke the following words to Maestro, words that he would never forget.
"As you leave your youth behind you, a wizard manifests in its stead. You will come for training, boy!"
The courtroom gasped in surprise at the orange-robed wizard's assertion. Maestro had replied,
"But I do not want to become a wizard. I'm to be an engineer."
The wizard had smiled and replied,
"Of course, those who display the gift for channeling the winds of magic, most would call it as much a curse as a blessing. But make no mistake, an untrained person with magical attunement in their blood will be set on a course to chaos. Do you want to become a chaos spawn? Do you, boy?"
Maestro didn't even know what a chaos spawn was, but still answered,
"Not particularly, no."
He had noticed that the wizard, while serious in what he said, had a kindly face. His eyes glowed a strange orange colour. His hair was blonde with streaks of orange permeating through it. He wore a multitude of keys about his person, like jewellery.
"Not particularly,"
answered the wizard, to the spectacle of the crowd gathered.
"It would be a matter of time."
He started, as his appearance and size seemed to grow to Maestro's eyes. His eyes were focused, and for the first time frightened the boy as he continued,
"Before the ruinous powers have at you, those who would show the skills of wizardry, but refuse to train, or those who try to run away or train illegally outside of the college, they are considered to be hedge wizards, outlaws, sentenced to death."
Maestro had listened to what the wizard had said, but one word stuck in front of his eyes like a tattoo on his retinas. Death.
"All right, I'll choose the me not being dead option, I believe, yes,"
came Maestro's reply in the end, reluctantly, with sorrow secretly in his heart. Not that the crowds cared. They murmured and tittered from the excitement of it all, while Karl Franz positioned his helm back upon his head, a concern of worry on his face. 17 years ahead again, that same look of concern held true to the Emperor's dour features. Tobias asked,
"Your Excellency, you don't surely mean the day he first discovered his magical abilities, do you?"
The Emperor looked at the halfling with some surprise.
Of course I mean that day. To some extent at least. He knocked the helm from my head, Herr Werwolf. I have been in countless battles, fought on the front lines against the ravaging creatures that seek to ruin mankind, to leave the Empire in flames, and not one of them ever unhelmed me.
Tobias raised both eyebrows at this. He knew that there was more to this story than the Emperor was letting on. However, it wasn't like he could press the issue, so he dropped that line of thought there.